Hello and welcome. The Ask the Pro series is powered by the Coffee Technicians program. Interested in developing your skills as a coffee technician? Check out the Coffee Technicians program, an education program for new and experienced technicians alike. Available at the foundation, intermediate, and professional levels, the Coffee Technicians program consists of 6 modules: coffee machines, hydraulics, electrical, water and preventive maintenance, operations management, and coffee preparation. You can learn more at sea.coffee/coffeetech. That is sea.coffee/coffeetech.
All right. Thank you, Richard. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I am Keegan. I'll be playing host to kick us off here. Today we're going to be talking about hydraulic schematics. Ready for our next slide here, Highland?
Keegan, is your internet bothering you again?
The video's just not updating. Everyone's cameras are, but the presentation is not.
You want me to take over? You want to do coffee? Why don't you do coffee?
All right, let's do coffee then. Let's go down the list here. Michael Tehan, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking an Americano Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. I don't normally do Americanos, but I'm on a strict diet to get back down to my college weight. So there it is. My morning latte is not happening for 3 months. So, but I get 1 ounce of latte to kind of fake it.
Latte with ultra skim milk.
Yeah.
How about you, Maria?
Greetings. I am drinking actually a cup of beautiful Costa Rican brewed by a friend of mine. I'm staying at their place here in Denver. And Michael, I appreciate where you're going there. I say that I just do different boxing weights, right? Bantam, fly, super heavyweight. So yeah, I just go up and down weight classes. It's cool.
Love it. Kurt, what do you have in your cup today?
Drinking a really nice, wet processed Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. So really good.
Delicious. How about you, Highland?
Me, I was at the gym this morning and I have not had coffee yet. So I'm about to have clay coffee Congo. That's really good, but I did not have time.
You're brave jumping in here without a cup.
I know. And I got to moderate too with Dawn.
That's right.
It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. So.
That might need more than coffee.
All right, Mr. Don Berquist,
yes.
What are you drinking today?
Full City Coffee out of Eugene, Oregon. Full City blend as an Americano, but when I say Americano, it's not diluted with your wet process water so much. It's
wet process water.
It's a really hot load, we'll say. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Every day.
All right, and I am drinking a Rwanda Kanini Village from Stella here in Chicago. Nice, washed, good, clean cup.
Yeah, let's not forget our friend Ben, who couldn't be on camera.
Yes, and over to Ben Brown.
Hi, yeah, I'm having a nice cappuccino this morning. Cafe D'Arte is the roaster of it. Yep.
Oh, right on.
Hey, and Highland, my presentation's still not updating on my screen. If you don't mind jumping in.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Disclaimer, this presentation is for informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this webcast are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or positions of any aspect of the Specialty Coffee Association or the companies the panelists may represent. I try and read that faster every time. Welcome to the Ask the Pro series. This is our 4th season. We are committed to presenting these episodes throughout the year, so save Fridays at 8 at Pacific Standard Time for Coffee Tech Guild. And I'd like to introduce Don first before we start with Don. We have two special guest panelists, Michael Tehan, who some of our viewer knows. Michael, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Let's see. I've been, well, my standard line is I got involved in coffee when there were only 6 Starbucks locations.
It's a good line.
Yeah, only 6. They had Schultz had just bought Starbucks and had to sell off Caravale as a wholesale arm just to kind of finance the whole deal. Yeah, coffee hadn't quite hit the Northwest yet, so we were selling espresso machines, and I was working with Michael Espresso up in Seattle initially, and just got involved on the tech side. I wasn't a very good salesman, as to be honest, but I learned quite a bit about how to make the machines work. Basically, a Leatherman tool and some baling wire was pretty much all that was necessary for me to fix almost anything.
And Ben Brown, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Ben Brown with Nuova Distribution. We do Nuova Simonelli and Victoria Arduino equipment. I've been with them for about 16 years. Got into the biz with local service agent here in Bellingham, Washington. Was tired of working on bikes and was intrigued by espresso machines, and here we are.
And on to the old dean of espresso machines and coffee, Don Berquist. Introduce yourself before we get started, Don.
Well, I've been doing this for about 3.5 years. And
Quick study.
You know, it's not about how much time you got. It's about what you've done with the time, you know? Yeah, so I am a quick learner or a really dumb slow one. Take your pick. And yeah, basically I've been doing this for a while. I pretty much started off installing machines during that same heyday where, well, actually a little bit before that, I was running some cafes in Portland. And then I was following where Michael was focusing on downtown Portland. I was focusing on the rest of the Pacific Northwest rural environment, and yeah, riding that wave of machines and then having to support them. And then finally I decided that I really need to sleep at night. So wait a minute, I started a company in 2000, sold it in 2003 because I really did plan on sleeping one day, and I came to work for Ranchilio. And so I've been working here ever since. They've kept me around and off the streets. So there you go.
So rules of thumb, panelists, when Don starts, go dark. Don, Michael, you'll be the key. If the panelists have any questions, please turn on your camera and your sound. Don, I'm going to let you get started. Viewers, put your questions in as we go. We'll try to get them answered. Any questions before we start, guys?
Yes.
Yes, Don.
I need, you know, I've got a few years of college under me, and you know, you always had that dream that you woke up and on the last day, you actually realize you've got a final exam and you didn't even take the class. I misread the entire presentation. I'm surprised you didn't catch it, Highland, when you were reformatting. I was reading hydraulics, not hydraulic schematics.
Hydraulics is fine, Don. We changed the game up here a little bit on occasion.
I'm all prepared for, let's talk about the hydraulics in the machine. Yeah. So
hydraulics is fun. I read it and I was actually incredibly impressed with the content. So I go ahead. It's a brilliant presentation. It's going to really help our viewers. Let's get started. Don, I'm going to go off camera and you're on. Just say when you want the lens to go over the presentation to move. Just let me know.
Let's go ahead and move forward to my first slide, not the preliminaries. Highland. Oh, can I move it?
Yeah, I can move it. Can you see the slide?
Yes, I can. Go ahead and move forward because the first 3 or 4 are actually CTG.
It's not moving for you?
No, it's not. Oh.
No, I only see the CTG.
What page are we on right now?
We're on page 3. We're on hydraulics right now.
Fair enough.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not moving for the users.
Try now.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Okay.
So basically, I always like to draw analogies so you better understand things. You know, trying to take you from where you are to where you need to go. And, you know, try to make it as simple as possible without dumbing it down too much. So, you know, water's just in an espresso machine, it's like a freeway. It's trying to lead to your destination. Where are we trying to end up? We're trying to end up in the coffee. Okay, there's only one problem. Along the way, there are a couple of exits, and it's really, really important that you understand those exits because as you get into diagnosing machines, wait a minute, the water's not, I've got a problem with my coffee, and you're focused on the coffee, and maybe you're focused on the beginning of the machine. But the fact of the matter, you could be losing all of your water for your coffee somewhere else. It's leaking out of something. So it's good to know where those off ramps are and where they lead to. And then next slide, please. Okay, it is critical that you memorize every component and layout found here, especially on the symbols that are used. And by the way, this was actually a joke because I like to scare you at the beginning of a technical training that it's going to be so complex. And I would like to know, I would actually like us to take a poll, CTG, for all the technicians out there of all the people that have actually seen a hydraulic schematic. The point here being, it's so much easier to look at pipes, look at tubing. It's harder on the electrical side because there's some components on the electrical schematic that are so critical to understand as you develop your knowledge. However, on the hydraulic side, it is amazing when I'll show somebody a schematic like this, and they're like, "Ooh, I can't see anything." And then I say, "This is a tank. Let's take a look at that." Or components, and even the point where I'm actually pointing in a machine and saying, "Let's touch that, let's feel that." There's a revolutionary change in a more rookie technician. It's easier for Michael and I to say, "Oh, let's take a look at that rotary vane pump. Michael, tell me everything you know about it." But for more of a rookie, showing parts and saying, "Here it is," even though it might be in the machine, I have found a transformational change in the uptake of knowledge where they're like, "Oh, I really got that. I really understand that now," even though there's one on the machine and one in your hand. So there you go. This was only a joke on the schematic, and I apologize for reading the syllabus wrong. So next slide, please.
Very funny.
Yes. Yeah, it was funny before this morning. Okay, so there you go. So I've been a whitewater rafter before, and you know, there's just some important, once again, back to analogies and such. You must know, you know, there's a lot that water has taught me, pressure and volume and speed, but you must know what the pitfalls that lay ahead, because when you're trying to diagnose the machine, once again, there's some things that we really need to know that are there that are going to probably be the whole reason that you're there. And then also you must know where the water is supposed to be going. You got to understand how we've engineered these machines, right? And then when you've given a choice of like two pathways, and you know that pathway is not going to the coffee because you see a little valve and you see a silicone hose going to the drain. Well, what is that? We need to understand that. That aspect of things. And then also, this is fundamental and foremost, what is normal and good? Okay, so Michael could walk up to San Marco 8516M. Well, he may not be able to anymore because he's probably too deaf. But from across the room, he's going to tell you, wait a minute, you know, we got a leak on the brew valve over on the left side, because he's paid attention, because he knows what is normal and good because he's seen it so many times. Next slide, please. And Michael, hop in here anytime you want to say anything.
As soon as I have a point of contention of some kind, yeah, I'll jump in.
Oh, I hope that I've provided something. Everybody knows me. Yes.
I'm waiting for it.
There you go. Okay, so you must know what pitfalls and problems. I thought the photo here would actually be, yeah, there you go. This is going to be very well could be a bad day. That's a little raft going down a river, and it's heading into trouble. So you must know what the pitfalls are, the problems that lay ahead. What are they? Small orifices. Where cold water hits hot water, because when that happens, we tell every scale molecule that's in solution in liquid, hey, go find a piece of metal and stick to it. Go find a buddy. And then what valves valves that won't close, and then valves that won't open. Next slide, please. So the first thing is that we need to know that an espresso machine has, and by the way, not all espresso machines have this. There's one company that didn't even start putting them in until 2012. Now they maintain that, you know, it's essential to the good production of coffee. But before that time, they didn't have them. And what is a jiggler or whatever you want to call it if you're in Kansas or in Italy or France? Or group jet if you're just a generic kind of person. So, and my other camera was going to pick this up better. Basically, we're just talking a piece of metal that's, what could be other things. We have some Teflon ones, and you just drill a hole through it. The whole idea is back in 2000, we're getting too old, Michael. Back many moons ago, we got away from lever machines that were fantastic because the pressure slowly built up. Ever since then, we've been trying to combat that problem that we created by putting a pump on a machine. So all the pressure, the tsunami water drills coming down is going to drill through. There's a place down at the bottom of my hill here. All they do is aerospace drilling with water. You know, enough pressure, and it is one of the cleanest cuts that you can get. And so, sorry, I'm remembering when somebody pulled the trigger on a pressure washer, and my hand was in front of it. It drilled real good. But my point being, that jiggler is the smallest orifice in the machine, and we're trying to hold back the pressure and then slowly let it fill the top of the puck, and then slowly perfuse down through the puck. And so the problem is it's the smallest jet in the machine. Also, water's not moving. So if you take water that has any sort of scale in it and park it and don't move it, it has a tendency to clog. It's sort of like, not Michael, because he's a healthy guy, my arteries and veins, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And so at some point in time, they're just going to close off. Well, and that's what happens with the jiggler. Now, the only problem is on a jiggler, what if I've got 2 groups, 3 groups? This actually regulates the flow of the water going to the coffee. So I need to make sure that they are all flowing water at the same rate. My old adage on our class 7, you walk up to the machine, it's got a display timer on it, press each of the buttons, assuming it's going to give you the same volume. Your flow meters are working to go, okay. What time comes out? And it should be around 8 seconds. Well, what if one's 16 seconds and 2 are 8s on a 3 group? Well, the barista is going to have a real hard time with that. And so I need to make sure that it's balanced, if you will. So any comments on that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the jet or the jiggler being the smallest orifice in the machine is right on. There's one other flow restrictor though that is in the system that isn't a jet, and that's the filter bed of the coffee itself. When you said that it takes roughly 8 seconds to dispense, a double shot or whatever is flowing from the group, the jet will always dispense water at a faster rate than the expected flow rate of the shot of espresso. That's because the filter bed is what actually does the final regulation of the flow through the machine. So it's kind of funny, so long as the jet is flowing faster than the expected flow rate of the espresso, most of flow rate problems are related to the grind of the grinder. So long as the jets are consistent, if they're calcifying equally, so to speak, you can live with it for a while. But yeah, the ultimate restriction is the filter bed. The jet is only there to make sure that everybody has a level playing field, that all the variables in the machine are consistent, and that the only variable is the operator and the coffee.
Very, very well put, and thank you for closing it, because I was going to have a rebuttal to it. It's like, yeah, there you go, reading ahead again. But no, that's,
I haven't seen the presentation.
So, no, I don't talk about coffee, because it's all about whether the machine is doing its job correctly. Like you put, it's the jiggler needs to set us up for success, and it can set us up for failure. Now, one of the other things I have a rule when balancing the groups, plus or minus 1 second. If you're bigger than that, so you got bigger than a 3-second swing on free flowing water for like a double shot, then you're going to start to exhibit some problems. When it becomes like 5 seconds, you're up a creek. You're gone. The barista's going to start having problems. But another point which you bring up, thank you, Michael. If we get close to the shot of espresso, now we've got a train wreck of pressure inside the group. So we got pushing forward, it's pulsing, and then it'll throw you a wild one where you get like a 50-second shot, and it's because the jiggler's flowing at 18 seconds and the coffee's flowing at 19. No, we need to be away from, but holding back some pressure, but still away from that shot time. So those people that are doing 10-second shots are going to have a little bit of an issue. Next slide, please.
Yeah, a 10-second shot might not even be developing any pressure inside within the filter bed.
Exactly.
If you have an 8-second free flow and a 10-second shot, you might as well be pouring filter coffee.
Well, over the decades, we've heard, oh, it's a self-tamping machine. That's because they're just using the jiggler as the restriction point. And yeah, there you go. So with that, on to the next one. Inside the system, we have like thermosiphon restrictors and flow meter. Now, on a thermosiphon machine, we take this is just a small one group tank. So we take water from the heat exchanger and flow it up to the group. And then we take the tube on the other side for this type of machine and flow it to the bottom. The issue there is, even though it's it's like the third smallest restrictor in the machine, it doesn't have a problem because water is constantly flowing while we're hot. As long as we're idling the machine, the water is moving, and that's not an issue. In contrast to flow meter, which has on the inside, in order to hit the little windmill on the flow meter, the impeller, accurately, we run it through a small orifice, and it's like the second or third, depending on machine, smallest orifice. However, it's cold fed most of the time. Yes, I'm sure there's plenty of people who will disagree with me because they're used to looking at one machine. But the fact of the matter is, usually it's cold fed, and that this only becomes a problem like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, depending on how bad your water is. Anyway, next slide. And okay, so getting back to cold water hits hot. Where's the number one? This is a big honking tube. This is an infusion tube, but I don't know if you can see that. That's a big old pipe. And what we're going to do is we're going to shove it in, and it's going to basically put the water into the middle of the heat exchanger. But it's cold water hitting hot, and it's not moving. So this actually, in my experience, is a big issue that technicians overlook because it's really hidden. Water will still flow out. This could be creeping along a little bit of water, but the problem is, basically it gets back to you can starve the heat exchanger for water and boil the water out of the heat exchanger. We don't need to get into that anymore unless Michael wants to. But then another item, blending valves. So this is a hot water blended valve. And so I have two valves, a cold and a hot, and they can pulse and give us two different temperatures. The problem is there's a little needle valve in there where we're just allowing a little bit of cold water to get in. Whole point is cold hitting hot. This is actually the canary in the mine for the average barista that's not taking care of their water in the espresso machine, because you'll actually close off half of the valve. So you'll only get hot or you'll only get cold, depending on how it's set up. Michael?
Yeah, the mixing valve can also not just clog up with calcium, but it also can create kind of a corrosive effect. It can deteriorate some of the metals, especially when you're mixing steam with cold water to create hot water. At least that's what I've seen in a few occasions.
So, Mike, can you go in a little bit more detail on the corrosive aspect of it?
Well, it's like looking at the Grand Canyon. Water is exceptionally corrosive, especially if you're running things like RO systems and not doing, not feeding, some kind of, something back into the water to kind of, amp up the dissolved solids. Water is a solvent essentially. So if you're running particularly clean water, there in some aspects of the machine, it can actually deteriorate some of the metal. So that that's why it but that goes all the way back to water quality and what you're feeding the machine. Copper can actually corrode from the inside. It's not usually a problem with espresso machines if they're just running water softeners and filtration systems, but if you try to run like a straight RO and you don't have any bypass, or you don't have a what is the filter for feeding dissolved solids back into the water?
Mineral addition.
Polishing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then you can have other issues with the machine. And the problem with that is, you can remove calcium, but you can't add back copper. So
might be dangerous. Okay, Don,
yeah.
back to you.
Okay, so we're on to the next one. Valves that won't close when they should. But basically we could have, we want to protect the flow meter. So on every espresso machine, you need to have a functioning check valve. So if the hot water from the espresso system's feeding back to the flow meter, then we melt our impeller if the temperature is hot enough. Well, so a check valve leaking can present a problem. It's usually rare for that to happen. It's not. You could have water going backwards to the pump and killing the impeller and the pump. It's not designed to be hot fed. It's designed to be cold fed. But check valves are usually not an issue. An expansion valve that won't close, that's a bigger issue. And we'll talk about expansion valves in a minute. And steam fill valves. I'm sorry, if you got a leaky steam fill valve, drip, 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 you're going to fill that tank up. And then brew valves, well, that's obvious. If we are leaking some of our water out of the exhaust of the brew valve instead of going to the coffee, well, guess what? Yeah, I gave you all the water you wanted as an espresso machine, but your coffee shots get shorter and shorter and shorter.
Now the thing about the check valve is the check valve doesn't have to be after the flow meter either. The check valve can be, even before the machine. The whole idea is to have a column of water that can't move backwards in the water circuit, and so long as that's functioning in there, then heat exchanger water, or if you're running a dual boiler system, water from that boiler can't push against that check valve, even if that check valve is at the very beginning of the machine. So that's why check valves are kind of important. And then the expansion valve has to be between that check valve and wherever and the rest of the machine, so that the expansion valve can do its job.
And how many times back in the day, and probably even still to this day, there's a certain brand of machine they used to like to put the check valve at the pump, and then the technician would come out, change the pump, and what's that long thing there, and not put that on, and then all of a sudden you're diagnosing 3 different problems over the next 2 months, right? As you're heating pumps for a living. Yeah,
my water line's hot. What the hell?
So. Next, valves that won't open. That's obvious. If we're not going to open the valve, like that check valve, that can be an issue. We're starving something, right? Expansion valves. Well, expansion valve. There we start fatiguing metal. We'll talk about expansion valves in a minute. Steam fill valves. I'm sorry. Let's just burn the water level down in the tank until we expose the heating element. And now we got a little fire going on the inside. Don't be alarmed by saying the word fire. It'll put itself out because it doesn't have oxygen. And then brew valves. Hey, I'm not. How many times this morning in the United States of America and Canada have we not opened one of these because somebody put detergent in it last night and forgot to rinse it out? How many machines do you figure? Was it 50 or 1,000? I don't know. But anyway, next slide, please. Okay, you must know the intended pathway. So where do we start with on the espresso machine? You got the water line coming to the machine. Then you got the pump. I don't have one of those. Then you divide the path of the water into steam and espresso routes, and those 2 waters will never come back together until you pour it in a cup in some fashion. This is actually something we use at Ranchillo, and basically this just replaces a whole bunch of pipes. So you got a T in there, and you got a check valve over here, and you got a check valve over there. This has 2 check valves. We have the steam side over here. The water comes in here, and then the espresso side's over here. The expansion valve's built into right here. An expansion valve, once again, once you go past the check valve, now you've entered into the espresso world. That expansion valve, as you heat the water in that closed system of the espresso, you're going to build, you can build 300, 400, 500 pounds of pressure. That'll actually start cracking pipes, fatiguing them if it's just not opening at the right level, but still opening a little bit. The whole point is that expansion valve, it just says, and typically they're set to 12. That's just the way they come from the factory. Some are adjustable, and I venture to say that most are maladjusted. That expansion valve just pops open when you hit 12 bar and exhausts a little bit of pressure. And by the way, on an expansion valve, you are only looking at, you know, a drip. You should never see running water. Michael?
Yeah, one of the things about what some people don't understand about how hot water works in an espresso machine is the whole concept of expansion and what's actually happening. Because the initial idea is that, well, we're heating up water, creating steam, so we must be building steam pressure, and it's steam pressure that's causing the expansion, but that's not the case at all. There's no steam whatsoever in the hot water circuit of the brew system of the machine. What's happening is similar to what happens when you freeze water. So when you freeze water, the way the molecular bonds come together, it causes an expansion. Everybody knows that cracks pipes and breaks groups and does all kinds of nasty things when they take, you know, when they store a machine in a garage and they think that, oh, I'll just bring it back out in the spring. When you heat water, it creates a similar kind of expansion. So when you go from ambient temperature up to brew temperature, that water expands about 4%, and that water has to go somewhere. So what the expansion valve does, by even dripping just a little bit, it bleeds off some of that small incremental expansion of the water. Again, no steam involved whatsoever. You don't even have to get up over 200 degrees for expansion to occur. As long as you're heating water, you have expansion. And if you don't have an expansion valve set to relieve that pressure, you know, it has to go somewhere. Sometimes it'll go in the gauge. You know, a lot of times you'll see, particularly with one manufacturer, where the brew pressure gauge will hit like 16 bar, 18 bar, because what's happening is, you know, if the expansion valve is stuck, the water has to go somewhere, and it's expanding in the gauge, and that's because that's the only place it can go. You know, as soon as you hit the brew cycle, it vents, but as soon as it stops, and you've got, you know, cold water that entered the system again, that cold water that enters the system is now heating up, and that's expanding. So that percentage increase isn't 4% of the total volume of the heat exchanger or the brew boiler. It's 4% of whatever the cold water is that's been entering the system to brew it. That's why an expansion valve only has to, you know, bleed off a few drips of water to vent that expansion. That make sense?
Very much, very much. By the way, one thing I should mention, stepping back to the previous slide, water line. I venture to say that half of the technicians that are actually out there touching a Rancilio don't realize that in the end of the water line is a check valve and a little strainer. And once again, back to how did we design the machine? And do you know all of those little pitfalls throughout the machine where it could be an issue? Now, it's only been an issue a couple of times. I mean, 10 times because somebody didn't flush a water filter in one region of the country for one technician. Nobody else has registered it. It's good to know. Okay, you pull the water line off of my water line, and you got water there. I plug it in, the machine has water. No, it doesn't, because you lost it right at the check valve. So, but anyway, now we're go ahead and go forward, please. Thanks, Simon. Okay, on the steam room. So we have a steam fill valve. You know, something has to regulate the, and this is a two-way valve. And so we've got water in, water out. And when the valve opens up, allows water to fill the steam tank. And we're not talking about electronics today, so we won't get into level probes and things of that nature. But that valve could close and not open because it's corroded, or you've got something, a problem with your water. Now, typically you want to have a check valve after that in order to protect the valve from the pressure, the back pressure from the steam tank. Not every manufacturer does that. And then you also have on some machines a manual fill. You know, on this one, it's right here. I'm a big proponent, by the way, of not opening a valve that has not been opened in a long time. So I tend to stay away from any valve that's not, you know, a manual fill valve or even a valve at the wall. I don't like opening it and closing it if it hasn't been moved in 35 years. And then we've got a hot water valve, which we talked about earlier. You know, I've got a dual one here, but you can have a single one, or you know, typically we're not going to have too many problems with that. If we have scale too much, we can get scale into this valve, but typically it's going to exhibit itself at the spout. And because of time, we're going to go ahead and hold off on that. Then we get finally to the steam valve. And, you know, that's the final termination before we start frothing, steaming some milk, frothing some milk. But hopefully, unless you started yesterday, you actually know how these function. You know, by some method, we're going to pull a plunger off, or some seal that's going to be pulled off of its seat, and then we're going to go ahead and allow steam to go forward. Michael?
Yeah, the reason why you see scale at the the exit ports is because whenever water evaporates, or whenever basically steam vapor evaporates, what's left behind is the scale and the calcium. It doesn't want to flow, with the steam, because it's basically it can't really live in steam. It only likes to live in water. So that's why you see the deposits there.
And that's like the real canary in the mine, because I could walk up to a machine without touching it, and I can say, you're not taking care of your water, just by looking at the spout. You get that little ring around the end of the spout where it's been hot, the water evaporated, leaves behind minerals. Then the alternative pathways. So we've got a vacuum breaker, an anti-suction, and a tank drain. Tank drain, hey, half of them don't work because they're sitting in the bottom where we hide all the scale. But we have to have a pressure relief valve in case we turn this thing into a bomb. And remembering that there are 2 pressure relief valves that you can buy. One is actually certified. It's been tested and it's been certified. There's a little gray portion on that valve at the top, and that is actually a seal. They used to make those seals out of lead. And it's just designed to exhaust the pressure. And then you've got a vacuum breaker. And there, it worked better on my other camera. So opens and closes, opens and closes. And in a nutshell, back to that expansion, air expands so much more than water. Michael's going to have the exact percentage of that, by the way, in just a second.
24 times.
Thank you very much. See, I told you. And so we allow the air to escape, because if we didn't, if this was not working correctly, and a lot of times it isn't because it's stuck in the closed position, a lot of the vacuum breakers are actually very cheap. And so if it sticks in the closed position, you'll actually get the air in the tank heats up. And then if you're using pressure to sense the pressure in the tank, a pressure sensor of some sort, transducer or PSTAT, it'll give it a false reading. And so we allow the air to escape. Once the air has mass, known as steam, it then hits the bottom of the plunger, and you hit like 211, 212, you close that up. And the same thing in reverse. We don't want to create a vacuum, so we allow this thing to drop down and allow air to come in while we're cooling the tank for whatever reason, be it you turned it off, it failed, or something of that nature. That way we can't suck milk into the tank. Michael?
No, that's exactly right. When you have a vacuum in a tank, it's like having 1 bar of pressure on the outside of the tank, and it wants to suck water or something from everywhere. If you've got a home machine, it'll suck it from the reservoir. If you don't, and you open up a steam valve and it's cold, you'll suck the milk right into the boiler. So yeah, the vacuum valve does two functions. The pressure valve, most pressure valves now are non-adjustable, I think, and even the ones that don't have the seal on top, sometimes they'll have a seal on the top or on the side. Sometimes they'll have a seal on the actual top of it, so that you can't fiddle with it. Pressure relief valves, do not touch them. Do not change them. Do not manipulate them. If it's leaking a little bit, don't tighten it. If it's whatever it is, just leave it alone and replace it. It is probably the most critical safety feature on the machine, and it's one of those things where you just don't screw with it. Just replace it and be done with it. It could even be part of a regular maintenance program, I think. It is, however, not the reason why boilers explode, though. you can have 5 pounds of steam pressure in a boiler, and it can, and if there's a fault in the seam or a weld or something like that, the boiler can still explode. It doesn't need to be, 500 pounds of pressure. So you can have a perfectly functioning pressure relief valve, and you can still have a catastrophic failure. But that doesn't keep you from that. It doesn't prevent you from maintaining it and swapping it out every few years just to be on the safe side.
I leaked a photo on the internet. It was the exploded view of an Astra, and basically, I actually was in front of the machine. The night before, a technician had done something. We could not find the evidence because that was probably in the ceiling, not the subceiling. It was probably portafilters were embedded in the wall. It fragged the entire building. It happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, and otherwise somebody would have died. But the whole issue is somebody either replaced the pressure relief valve and stuck in a bolt, or put the wrong device in there, something that kept the tank from blowing. Okay, then it sat for how many hours, and finally it had a failure where it overheated, but it probably took 5 hours to overheat to the point where it fragged. It literally looked like Alien, where the tank fragment. You couldn't find the portafilters near the machine. They blew off. Everything blew off the machine.
So what had happened was, the technician saw that the machine was leaking through the pressure relief valve constantly because the machine was overpressuring for some reason. And rather than find the source of the overpressuring problem, he just put a Band-Aid on it and says, well, I'll fix the overpressuring problem by not letting it overpressure, or not, we'll just cap it. That's why you replace pressure relief valves with pressure relief valves. I was working on it was a Pavoni like 30 years ago. And I had to replace the pressure relief valve. And I'd opened up the steam valves, turned off the machine, everything was fine. The steam stopped coming out. But this particular machine didn't have a vacuum valve. And because it didn't have a vacuum valve, they put 2 check valves behind the steam valves. So even though no steam was coming out, I still had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of pressure in the boiler. And I thought the boiler was completely evacuated. So I'm undoing the pressure relief valve, and I get to that last thread. And even, keep in mind, 2 or 3, 5 pounds at most, that pressure relief valve went through the ceiling. So yeah, it doesn't take much pressure to cause massive problems. So yeah, just replace the valve.
Wait, before we get moving, I need to jump in here. We're at our 8:45 mark, so we're going to go over after 9 a little bit. We do want to keep the floor to questions for the panelists, and if we could just move it a little bit faster, I would appreciate that.
No, thank you, Highland.
Thank you.
I realize. So, by the way, we have another vacuum breaker on the top of the valve, and that's for another. Don't want to get into all the details of that. That's about sucking milk up into the valve when everybody's doing everything right. But you'll find a lot of machines will actually have that. Now we're going to go over to the espresso side. Okay, so go to the next one, please. We already talked about the check valve, if you will. Now the expansion valve, I think we've covered that enough. Water comes into the system, has to be heated up. It will increase pressure, and we need to bleed that off. Now, knowing that, you should know as a technician whether that is an adjustable or non-adjustable. You take a look at mine. I mean, I'm sorry, it's buried in here. There's no screws adjustments on this. But if you're looking at like a brass part and you say, boy, there's no adjustment on that, well, that's a fire and forget. That's a 12 bar most likely. But there are very popular machines out there that actually have an adjustment on it. So you should never see 12 bar when you're actually going through a heating phase on those. And then we talked about the cold water infusion tube. That's a big problem because over a long period of time with scale, because we'll actually seal that off. And that will exhibit itself in overheating, but then it gets better. So the situation's changing where I walk up to the machine, I can make a shot, and then I make another shot and another shot, and then all of a sudden I don't have water coming out of my group, I've got steam coming out of my group. That's because of the infusion tube. And we already talked about the thermosiphon system. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay, so we already did talk about the Gigler and a wide variety. I mean, I actually have 3 different ones. One's a Teflon, this one's stainless steel for one particular model. And then I've got another one that's brass, and there's a little screen before you get to the jiggler. Just try to save it. By the way, and I don't have it with me. Every technician who's talked to me knows that I will say, aisle 43, bay 6, there's an acetylene welder tip cleaning tool. Every technician should be carrying it. You can actually clean this little jet out and other jets. Every technician should have that. Just remember, if I clean a jiggler, I've now got to test my machine back to that Dawn certification of plus minus 1.5 seconds of free flowing water. Because if you make it too big by reaming it out, you've got to try to balance them all. And if you don't have jigglers, go to the next one, please.
Keep in mind a paper clip is too big, and if you take a stapler and pop out a staple and straighten it out, that's about the right size.
Let me just point out one thing.
Please.
Please be careful of the manufacturers that don't use full metal. You know, there are ones that use synthetic type jets.
100%.
Yeah, and those will just get destroyed typically if you try and clean them. That's all I was going to say.
Well, and I have Teflon ones, and so that's a problem. Very good. No, let me drill that point home for drill that point more. This is actually stainless steel, but even if it was brass or stainless steel, I still, with my little baby, little reamer tools, not a paper clip, I'm professional. I want to, sorry, Michael. I want to be very ginger in that, because I'm just removing scale. I'm not trying to remove any metal or Teflon or plastic or nylon. So thank you very much. I appreciate that comment. Next one. Oh, what is normal and good? We're coming to the end here.
Or
once
ruby.
Again, what's that? I'm sorry?
Or synthetic ruby.
Exactly. Yeah, Rubicon. And so what is normal and good? Once again, Michael knew when that San Marco, even to this day, he'd walk up to a San Marco 8516M and he could tell you whether that machine was running right or not. And, so pay attention. What's the water flow coming out of the group on a normal for this machine? Remember, I've got 2 models of machines where they flow at a total different rate out of the group with free flowing water. What's the next one, Highland? Oh, this is, yeah. Well, once again, yeah, just pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. So that's about it. There you go.
And panelists up, please, and questions from the viewers. Does any of the panelists have questions or comments?
So I've got a question in terms of pitfalls you may see in systems or from technicians that maybe are familiar with the pathways of water flowing through a heat exchanger system versus a dual boiler system. If there's any watch outs that folks should have?
There are basically, in theory of design, a heat exchanger is just a boiler. It just doesn't have a heating element in it. We're just borrowing heat by conduction. So now the concept's the same. You know, you either have big pipes or little pipes, but the theory is the same. Now, one of the things that I always found on my 35-point checklist on a particular machine that uses a double boiler was there's actually an access port in the top of the tank where the water comes into that flooded boiler, and you would need to remove that little nut on the top and actually stick something in there to ream that out, because it would actually, in the top of that boiler, it would actually grow stuff. And we're not necessarily talking scale. All sorts of other compounds would actually adhere to the metal. So that's about the only thing, Michael.
No, that's right.
So
I mean, a heat exchanger is simply a boiler that heats from the outside.
Yeah.
How important is it to back flush the groove head with cleaner every night in terms of the hydraulic system?
So this one's for you.
And is there any special tricks to it? And then what happens if you back flush a machine for 24 hours?
Good point. And so this is a brew valve, standard brew valve. It's a 3-way valve. So every time you make a cup of coffee, the plunger opens up and seals the exhaust. But where do we get rid of that 130 PSI of pressure? we let the valve close. Now water's not moving forward. But wait a minute, I've got coffee pressure that comes back and comes out the exhaust. And so every time you make a drink, you're going to get coffee in here. Okay, so let's clean this every day. And so the big problem is people don't clean it, because you need to clean an espresso machine every day with detergent, every day with detergent. And so what'll happen is they'll clean it, and pardon me, it's in a closed position. They'll go in and clean it, and then they don't rinse it enough. The plunger gets stuck in that position. Well, the easiest trick, you put a portafilter in the group, and you turn the water on, and you bang the portafilter. You're trying to shock this. If you can get that to move a little bit, water will dissolve the cleaner. And I actually had somebody, a bigger chain, actually changed the whole cleaning program, and they did run it for hours. Couldn't figure out why they were mowing through pumps. Water not moving through a rotary vane pump, the good ones, the best ones, will actually, you'll basically melt the Delrin plastic on the inside of the bypass in less than 5 minutes, because it was designed to be water cooled. So you will be destroying pumps if you run it continuously. So.
Question from Vladimir Serrano. Do scale inhibitors work?
Do we really want to get into water? You guys know me.
Not really.
By the way, in a nutshell, scale inhibitors are not, there's one scale inhibitor that's designed to actually be running at over 200 degrees. Only one. And because of some acquisitions, that cartridge is difficult to get at this point in time. All other scale inhibitors really start to form like an icing in the bottom of the steam tank and other places. They precipitate out. So scale inhibitors are great for brewers, but not for espresso machines, in a nutshell.
Yeah, the phosphates are designed to keep the hard water deposit in suspension as it passes through the brewer. Once it gets past about 185 degrees, the phosphates are no longer able to hold it in suspension, which is why it's not really applicable for espresso machines. You got to find a different way to.
And the reason I said one doesn't, and it's hard to find now because of company acquisition, is because it doesn't use polyphosphate. It uses another compound, which I'm not at liberty to discuss. Anyway, next one.
Yeah, you can send me a link because I'm looking for one.
Okay. Kurt, Maria, Ben, Keegan, questions? Maria's smiling, so she must have a question.
No, I think this has all been fantastic, but you got to protect yourself. Can't leak trade secrets, Mr. Berquist.
Oh no, it's not my trade secret. It's somebody else's that told me. It's like Full City Coffee does something unique with his roasting, and don't need to get into details. And I asked him, after you retire, go ahead and tell me, because I don't want to accidentally leak it out. By the way, I have a question. So why do we get scale in a steam tank?
Because the water is getting hot, and then it cools down some, and it gets hot, it cools down, and it falls out of solution.
Ranchilio's working on it, and sorry about the background noise for someone there. Ranchilio's working on it, but scale, we'll just use that generic term, will vaporize, turn into a steam at 1400 degrees. We're not quite there yet with that 1400 degrees. So what happens is we pull out pure water and we leave behind anything that doesn't turn into a gas. And so because we're only operating like 250, it gets left behind. Now, why does water freeze and get bigger?
It's the way the molecular bonds are formed.
No. What molecular bonds? It's hydrogen versus
the water molecule.
Hydrogen versus
when the water molecules come together, the way that they're configured.
Details. So hydrogen bonding versus covalent bonding. So hydrogen bonding doesn't happen. It breaks apart and turns into covalent when you freeze water at below 32 degrees. So all the molecules are lined up nice in hydrogen bonding, which is 50% about. And so when they turn into covalent, they all just kind of like say, spread out, please. There you go. Now you have all the facts that you really didn't need.
Okay, guys, it's time for closing statements.
Breeze gets big.
Okay. Next, Don, will you be joining us to pick on Michael next week? For his Michael, yours actually is electrical schematics for next week.
Yeah,
So
mine will be very exciting. Basically, you'll see a lot of pictures of schematics and Italian terms and trying to decipher and decode what they all mean, so that when you're looking at the side of an electronic box, you're not completely befuddled.
Can we maybe include how to troubleshoot off of schematics too, just in case?
Yeah, I guess I could. Yeah, I should put the presentation together first.
You probably should. Okay, Don. Anything?
Just so you know, I have that medical thing that I can't.
Okay, yeah, I forgot about that. Ben, anything before we wrap it up from you?
No, I appreciate all the input. Nice to hear from you guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Kurt, how about you?
No, just like to thank our presenters.
Thanks for your point on that.
I love the analogies. I think they're so important to help people remember, water's flowing through the machine and it's going to stop at certain places, and it helped. I think it's a real important training tool.
Keegan?
Too kind.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just thank you, and really appreciate the highlighting those trouble spots where cold water meets hot, and the any small flow restrictions. That's more folks know that, the less phone calls I think a handful of people on this call are gonna get down the line. So really appreciate highlighting those.
Michael, how about you? Wait, go for it, Don.
No, Michael, please go ahead.
No, it's that in terms of technical questions, it's like that when you're fielding questions in the field, like, okay, is it hot? Is it not hot? Basically, water doesn't like change. Anytime you change pressure, temperature, anything that changes in the flow of water, it objects. That's why you don't see a whole lot of scale in just dedicated water boilers, because you're not creating steam. It's nice and docile. It's just in a water state all the time. It's not rapidly changing in temperature. That's why you'll see calcium in steam boilers, but not so much in hot water boilers. So whenever you're looking for a scale deposit or any kind of obstruction, look for wherever something has changed or is likely to change. Jets, jigglers, expansion valves, even when pipe bends, transitions from one kind of pipe to another. That's where the obstruction is going to be, and that's where calcium is going to grow.
Thanks, Michael. Don, how about you?
So when I started, I actually had an unlimited plan with Ranchilio in 2003. I had an unlimited plan from Nextel. They tried to cancel me and get rid of me because they told me that I was spending 8,000 minutes a month on the phone minimum. And my whole point is there were 7 distributors when I started, and I was one of them. Therefore, now there's only 6. And then I fired 2 for surreptitious activities. And so as I'm spending all that time, this gets back to your education. I'm speaking to the not everybody here, the whole group in the field. Please yearn to learn more. I know you want that, because if you're a technician, that's what you're wanting, right? But the whole point is, I was spending so much time going over the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. And I believe that I'm north of 1,000, 1,500 technicians that I've trained. I've seen them come and go, but I've seen a lot stay. The whole point is I don't answer all those calls anymore, because we went over all those little details inside the machine. That's why I have a 100,000 K with Alaska Airlines, because it travels so much. So the whole point is, as you learn, as you get that experience, be asking. And I said in the Coffee Technician Guild in Missouri, and I'll close with this. Okay, so there's a bunch of old guys here, and there's a bunch of young people. The young people, you don't have as much experience. Learn from the stupid mistakes of the old people. Try to find somebody to mentor you.
Because we've made plenty of stupid mistakes.
Gentlemen,
cool.
Thank you so much for attending. Next week's episode will be electrical schematics and troubleshooting with Michael Tehan and the panelists, and we might have a few guest panelists. Don, I wish you could join us.
Me too.
Thank you, our viewers. We've had a small handful of viewers, but there was some issues with connection. We have the world again. So we had, and apparently every tech in Greece did join us.
Cool.
I really appreciate the work, you guys. Thank you so much. And everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for what you do.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.